The sun rose slowly over the Nevada desert, painting the remote U.S. Army training base in muted golds and dusty reds. Inside the armory, a small, unassuming building at the far edge of the base, Alyssa Cole was already at work. Her sleeves were rolled up, gloves tucked into her belt, and her eyes were fixed on the rifle in front of her. She moved with a quiet precision, disassembling the bolt-action rifle with mechanical efficiency, wiping each component until it gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Most soldiers didn't give her a second glance. She was just the woman who cleaned weapons, the background noise in a place where men's voices and gunfire dominated. Alyssa didn't mind. She liked the quiet, the routine, the smell of gun oil and polished metal. For her, every rifle told a story of a soldier's skill, a mission, a heartbeat on the edge of danger. She could feel the life of the weapon, the history ingrained in every groove of the barrel. Every movement was deliberate, almost ritualistic. Her past was her own secret. No one on base knew that she had once been trained in one of the Army's most classified long-range marksmanship programs. Few even remembered her name because she had walked away from the spotlight years ago, leaving behind accolades, awards, and whispered rumors of impossible shots made in faraway deserts and mountains. All of that was buried. Here, she was just Alyssa, the quiet armorer, invisible to the boisterous soldiers who patrolled the hallways. On this particular morning, however, something unusual was happening. A group of visiting snipers had arrived from another base. They were all chatter and confidence, striding into the armory with the swagger of men who had spent years claiming impossible shots. Their boots clanged against the concrete floor, echoing in the otherwise quiet building. They were here to inspect equipment, set up a few drills, and most importantly, show off. One of them, Staff Sergeant Hunter Briggs, a man with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, noticed her immediately. Not because of the quiet way she worked, but because of the subtle skill she displayed in handling the rifles. Alyssa didn't rush. She didn't fumble. Every bolt, spring, and scope adjustment was precise, fluid, almost as if she were performing a dance that only she could see. Hunter had handled hundreds of rifles in his career, but there was something different about the way she moved. "Hey," he said casually, stepping closer. "You handle that like someone who's actually fired it." His voice carried a mix of curiosity and challenge. The other snipers laughed, assuming he was teasing the quiet woman in the corner. "Or maybe she's just overconfident," one muttered. Alyssa didn't look up. She continued her work, wiping the stock, checking the alignment of the barrel, lightly tapping the scope to ensure zero movement. Her expression was calm, almost meditative. Yet her hands moved with the authority of someone who had spent years understanding the intimate behavior of a rifle, how it reacted to pressure, how it breathed in different temperatures, how the slightest misalignment could mean a missed shot. Hunter leaned a little closer, lowering his voice. "I don't suppose you've actually fired one, have you?" He wasn't trying to mock her. Curiosity had replaced the usual joking tone in his voice. Alyssa paused for just a second, then replied without looking up, "I've fired enough to know what it wants." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Hunter frowned slightly, intrigued. She wasn't bragging, yet there was a quiet confidence that made him uneasy. Something about her demeanor suggested she had knowledge and skill that didn't belong in the armory with someone quietly cleaning rifles. "Careful," one of the other snipers joked loudly, nudging a comrade. "Don't let her turn you into one of her targets." The room filled with laughter, but Hunter's attention didn't waver. He watched as she meticulously checked the chamber of a .338 LM rifle, adjusting the scope with such accuracy it could have been ceremonial. He couldn't explain why, but his gut told him she wasn't what she seemed. Alyssa set the rifle down gently, inspecting the muzzle with her gloved hands. She ran her fingers along the grooves, tilting her head slightly, her eyes narrowing. Hunter noticed it, the focus in her gaze, the subtle flick of her wrist, the way she measured, calculated, and corrected in silence. He swallowed. There was an aura of precision about her that none of the visiting snipers could ignore, even if they pretended to laugh at her. Then came the small, almost imperceptible motion that made him stop. She adjusted the scope again, not just for alignment, but for windage, elevation, and temperature. Hunter's mind raced. This wasn't casual knowledge. This was someone who understood ballistics to a degree that only elite snipers ever reached, and yet she was cleaning rifles like any ordinary armorer. Hunter couldn't resist asking the question that had formed in his mind. "You ever go long range?" he asked, his tone casual but loaded with meaning. Alyssa didn't look up, just continued her careful movements. "Depends on how far," she said softly. Her voice carried the calm certainty of someone who didn't need to prove anything. The other snipers snickered. "Long range, she's just cleaning rifles," one laughed. But Hunter had the distinct feeling that this was no joke. Alyssa's calm, deliberate approach spoke louder than any words. She wasn't here to impress, yet she impressed everyone anyway. Hours passed, and the visiting snipers completed their inspection. They joked, flexed, and shared stories of record shots and impossible distances. Alyssa stayed in her corner, silently cleaning weapons, occasionally glancing at the group as if weighing their abilities. Hunter couldn't keep his eyes off her. There was a tension building inside him, a quiet curiosity mixed with disbelief. He had seen many skilled shooters, but something about Alyssa made him question everything he thought he knew. As the group prepared to leave, Hunter leaned over slightly, a half-smile on his face. "You ever wonder what it's like to hit a target that no one else can?" he asked, almost teasingly. Alyssa glanced at him for the first time, her expression unreadable. "Targets," she said softly, "are just problems waiting to be solved." The words sent a ripple through his mind. She wasn't just cleaning weapons. She was preparing, practicing, thinking. Every movement was purposeful, every glance calculated. And in that quiet Nevada armory, amidst the clanging boots and loud laughter of overconfident men, a silent challenge was taking shape. Hunter didn't know it yet, but the day had shifted. Alyssa Cole, the woman who everyone ignored, was about to change everything they thought was possible. She was quiet. She was unseen. And yet, in the way she handled that rifle, she had already captured the attention of everyone in the room. As the sun climbed higher over the desert, Alyssa continued her work, each motion deliberate, each adjustment precise. Outside, the visiting snipers joked and boasted, unaware that a silent storm of skill and precision sat in their midst. By the time the day ended, the seed of curiosity, respect, and awe had been planted in the minds of men who had never been humbled before. Alyssa cleaned the last rifle, setting it back in its rack with a gentle click. She wiped her hands, took a slow breath, and glanced out the window at the endless desert. Somewhere out there, a challenge waited, one that she had been preparing for her entire life. And when the time came, she would step out of the shadows, quiet no longer, and reveal what she had always been capable of. And somewhere in the corner of the armory, Hunter Briggs knew she wasn't just an armorer. She was something far more dangerous, far more skilled, and far more unforgettable than anyone could imagine. The armory was quieter now, the clatter of rifles and boots fading as the visiting snipers began their formal inspections. Alyssa Cole remained at her bench, meticulously cleaning a .338 LM, her gloved hands moving with a rhythm that seemed almost ritualistic. Every screw, every spring, every tiny component passed under her touch like she had known it all her life. Her movements were precise but calm, deliberate but almost invisible to those who weren't looking closely. Sergeant Hunter Briggs had been watching her since the moment he walked in. At first, he had assumed it was simple curiosity, an armorer at work. But something about her caught his eye. Perhaps it was the way she balanced the rifle with both confidence and care, the same hands that could clean a weapon now steady enough to take the longest, most impossible shot. Or maybe it was the subtle glint in her eyes, a quiet intelligence, a certainty no one else seemed to possess. "Hey," he said, leaning over casually as if striking up a friendly conversation. "You've handled enough rifles to know what you're doing, huh?" His voice carried a mixture of teasing and genuine curiosity. He expected Alyssa to ignore him or maybe give a polite smile. Instead, she kept working, nodding slightly without lifting her eyes. "I've handled enough to know what they want," she replied softly. No bravado, no exaggeration. Just a fact quietly stated. Hunter frowned. That simple phrase was loaded. He had spent years on the range, moving from target to target, mastering every inch of his rifles and scopes. And yet in that one statement, Alyssa suggested a level of experience he hadn't encountered in years. He leaned a little closer, trying to read her expression. Her calm, unreadable face only made him more curious. She wasn't showing off, yet there was authority in the way she moved. Authority born from skill. Nearby, the visiting snipers were joking among themselves, unaware of the tension building in the armory. "She's just cleaning rifles," one laughed, nudging another. "Maybe she thinks she's one of us." Their voices carried confidence, perhaps overconfidence, as they boasted about impossible shots and record distances. They had never seen anyone like Alyssa, and they certainly didn't suspect that someone at the far corner of the room could challenge every assumption they had about skill and precision. Hunter studied her closely. He noticed the tiny adjustments she made, the way she tilted the scope to check alignment, the subtle testing of the trigger pull, and the way her finger hovered lightly near the bolt. She wasn't just familiar with the rifle, she understood it, almost as if the weapon itself were an extension of her body. A chill ran down his spine. He had trained hundreds of soldiers, but he had never seen someone so effortlessly merge knowledge and instinct. "You ever actually fired one?" Hunter asked, keeping his tone casual but filled with curiosity. Alyssa's hands paused briefly and she looked at him for the first time, her expression calm, almost detached. "Depends on how far," she said softly. No one laughed this time. The other snipers noticed the shift, the sudden gravity in her voice. It wasn't a joke. Hunter's brow furrowed. He had been in situations that required skill under pressure, and instinctively he recognized the calm behind her words. She had done this before, many times perhaps. One of the younger snipers, eager to appear clever, chuckled. "Long range, she's just an armorer." But Hunter didn't react. His eyes never left her. The subtle way she handled the rifle, the way she checked the barrel, the way she adjusted for balance, all signs that this woman knew far more than she let on. She wasn't ordinary. She wasn't just an armorer. She was something else entirely. Hunter decided to push further, though the words caught in his throat for a moment. "Ever wonder what it's like to hit a target that no one else can?" he asked, carefully observing her reaction. Alyssa paused, then glanced up briefly, meeting his gaze with an almost imperceptible spark of interest. "Targets are just problems waiting to be solved," she said softly. There was no arrogance, no challenge, only certainty. The words sent a shiver down Hunter's spine. She spoke like someone who had seen what most could not, who had calculated distances, angles, and wind in her head long before anyone else even noticed. Alyssa returned to her work, slowly cleaning the rifle as if nothing had happened, but Hunter's mind was racing. He had encountered highly skilled marksmen in his career, some of the best the Army had to offer, but the quiet precision in her hands suggested training and experience far beyond a standard sniper program. Her composure was almost unnatural. She didn't rush, she didn't hesitate, and she didn't need validation. Everything she did spoke of someone who had mastered her craft, not for applause, but because she understood it completely. The visiting snipers were oblivious to the quiet tension building. They boasted about shots over 3,000 meters, about conditions in wind and desert mirages, laughing and making wagers. Alyssa listened, still at her bench, but her mind seemed elsewhere. Every adjustment she made to the rifles was purposeful, a silent preparation. Hunter couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't just cleaning weapons, she was visualizing, calculating, rehearsing. Hunter noticed the faint lines of concentration around her eyes, the tilt of her head as she adjusted the scope, the way her fingers traced the barrel. He leaned slightly closer to one of his peers. "She's calculating," he whispered. "She's thinking about shots we can't even see yet." The peer scoffed. "Come on, she's just an armorer." But Hunter wasn't so sure. There was a precision in her movements that only years of training and extraordinary talent could explain. Alyssa finally set the rifle aside, wiped her gloves clean, and stood up. Her movements were smooth, graceful, almost deliberate in their calmness. She glanced around the room, her eyes briefly meeting Hunter again. There was a faint hint of amusement, as if she were aware of the quiet storm she was stirring among the men. Yet she said nothing, returning to her workbench and picking up another rifle, her attention focused entirely on the task at hand. Hunter felt a mixture of awe and unease. He had underestimated her, and the realization left a sharp taste in his mouth. The air in the armory seemed to shift slightly, as if acknowledging that this was no ordinary armorer, no ordinary woman. She moved like someone who had mastered not just rifles, but patience, timing, and precision. And in that small, dusty room in Nevada, he felt a moment of clarity. Something remarkable was hiding in plain sight. By the end of the morning, Alyssa had finished cleaning and inspecting every weapon in the armory. She arranged them meticulously, almost ceremoniously, on their racks. She removed her gloves, shook the dust from her hands, and stood for a moment, staring out the window at the endless stretch of desert. The sun was climbing high, casting long shadows across the sand. Somewhere out there, challenges awaited, and she would be ready. Hunter remained behind, watching her with a mixture of fascination and respect. The others had left, oblivious to the quiet storm that had passed through the armory. He finally spoke aloud, half to himself, half to her. "I think you could do something no one here has even imagined." Alyssa simply smiled faintly and returned to her bench, picking up a cleaning cloth. No words were needed. Her presence spoke volumes. She was a master hiding in plain sight, and the impossible shot that no one dared to dream of was quietly taking shape in her mind. In that moment, the seed was planted. Hunter realized that the quiet armorer had the skill, the patience, and the knowledge to change everything they thought possible. And when the time came, everyone would witness what she was truly capable of. But for now, she was silent, invisible, and utterly formidable. The stage was set, and the story had just begun. The afternoon sun scorched the Nevada desert, sending waves of heat rolling across the military base. The visiting snipers had gathered near the outdoor range, rifles slung casually over shoulders, joking and bragging about their record shots. A few of them waved small-range flags, laughing over past feats, shots over 3,000 meters, desert conditions that had humbled even the most experienced marksmen. They were confident, almost arrogantly so, certain that nothing could surprise them. Alyssa Cole followed at a distance, carrying a rifle case like it weighed nothing, her gloved hand steady. She moved silently, almost blending into the sun-drenched landscape, unnoticed by most. Hunter Briggs walked beside her, his curiosity now tinged with growing anticipation. He had watched her in the armory, had felt the weight of her quiet mastery, and now he wondered if the rumors about her past were true. Could she actually match or surpass the impossible? The group reached the firing line. Target placement stretched across the desert, steel plates glinting in the sunlight, far off beyond the horizon. One of the visiting snipers, clearly trying to impress the others, bragged about a 3,400-meter shot he had made on a previous deployment. "You know, you have to calculate wind at 3 points, adjust for mirage, temperature, it's tricky," he said, smirking at the others. They nodded knowingly, their confidence radiating in waves. Hunter's eyes drifted to Alyssa. She had opened the rifle case and was setting up her weapon with calm precision. Each movement was deliberate, as if she had done this 1,000 times before. The other snipers noticed, some raising eyebrows. She's just setting up," one whispered nervously. Hunter shook his head. He knew better. Every flick of her fingers, every check of the scope and stock, told a story of experience far beyond cleaning rifles. Then, with a grin half teasing, half challenging, Hunter spoke. "So, Alyssa, you think you could make a 3,970-meter shot?" The room erupted in laughter. A few snipers hooted and slapped each other on the back, almost falling over. "Did he just ask her that?" One laughed. "She's cleaning weapons, man. That's insane." The desert seemed to echo their amusement. Alyssa paused, her gloved hand still on the rifle. She tilted her head slightly, her calm gaze meeting Hunter. "What's the wind reading?" she asked, her voice quiet but firm. The humor in the room evaporated. Everyone froze for a moment. No one expected her to respond seriously. "What?" one sniper stammered, disbelief in his tone. She's actually asking. Hunter swallowed, feeling a twinge of unease mixed with excitement. Her question was not rhetorical. She wasn't joking. She had just asked the critical first question that any sniper must ask before attempting such an extreme shot. Alyssa adjusted her rifle on the bipod, scanning the range. The steel target at 3,970 meters seemed impossibly far. The air shimmered with heat and the wind twisted unpredictably. Most soldiers would have considered this laughable, a fantasy that existed only in stories. But Alyssa approached it methodically, silently calculating in her head. Distance, angle, bullet velocity, spin drift, Coriolis effect, mirage distortion, temperature and humidity. Every factor mattered. She had to account for all of them. The snipers continued to watch, their amusement fading into disbelief. Slowly, curiosity began to replace laughter. One of them muttered, she actually knows what she's doing." Another leaned closer, trying to catch a glimpse of her adjustments. Hunter's eyebrows furrowed. He had suspected she was skilled, but the precision in her hands and the seriousness in her question exceeded even his expectations. Alyssa raised the scope to her eye, taking her first measurements. The rifle trembled slightly under her touch, but only for a moment. Then she steadied it, breathing in and out with measured calm. She whispered numbers under her breath, calculations, angles, adjustments, each spoken softly but with the confidence of certainty. The air around her seemed to quiet, as if even the desert itself held its breath. "You've got to be kidding," one of the younger snipers said, shaking his head. "That shot is insane. Even the longest range record shots we know of don't touch that distance. She's dreaming." But Alyssa didn't dream. She prepared. She lined up her shot, adjusted for every environmental variable and recalculated in her head. Hunter watched closely, his pulse quickening. He had seen expert snipers take extreme shots, but never had he observed such focus, such deliberate preparation, in someone who had been considered invisible just hours before. Minutes passed. The other snipers murmured among themselves, some doubtful, some silently awed. The tension was palpable. Alyssa didn't speak, didn't react, didn't acknowledge the murmurs. Her entire world narrowed to the scope, the target, and the rifle under her hands. She had done this before, though no one knew. She had made shots that seemed impossible, hits that others only dreamed of. And now, in the Nevada desert, she was preparing for the ultimate challenge. A 3,970-meter shot that had never been attempted at this base. Hunter leaned closer, whispering, "You really think you can do it?" Alyssa's eyes never left the scope. "It's just physics," she said quietly. "It's not impossible, it's just extremely precise." The visiting snipers laughed nervously, unsure whether she was serious. The distance seemed absurd. The desert heat, the wind gusts, the mirages, all factors that could ruin the shot made it seem laughable. But Hunter knew better. He had watched her work, observed the quiet authority in her movements, and felt the certainty in her voice. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't lucky. She was calculating. She began making final adjustments to the rifle, leveling it with painstaking care. Every movement was deliberate, every calculation precise. The target loomed at the edge of sight, a distant steel plate shimmering under the desert sun. Yet Alyssa's confidence never wavered. She didn't flinch at the impossible distance, didn't falter at the challenges ahead. The room grew quiet, except for the soft hum of the desert wind. Even the snipers who had laughed earlier now watched in silence, their attention captured by the calm mastery of the woman they had dismissed as merely an armorer. Hunter felt a surge of anticipation and respect. He knew, in that moment, that the impossible question had already changed everything. "All right," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "Let's see what she can do." Alyssa adjusted her breathing, settling behind the rifle. Her gloved hands gripped the stock firmly, yet gently. Her eyes were sharp, focused, almost unyielding. She had spent years preparing, training, and honing her skills in secrecy. And now, in the open Nevada desert, she was about to demonstrate the precision and calm that had made her legendary, though no one outside her past would ever have guessed it. The visiting snipers remained frozen, a mix of disbelief and curiosity written across their faces. A few whispered, quietly hoping she would fail. They couldn't comprehend how someone they had ignored could even attempt such a feat. Hunter, however, held his breath, his heart pounding with a combination of fear, anticipation, and admiration. Alyssa whispered a final adjustment to herself, aligning her scope with the distant target, taking wind, heat, and mirage into account. She exhaled slowly, her focus absolute. The desert seemed to hold its breath with her. And somewhere in that silence, a challenge that had once seemed impossible was about to be confronted head-on by the quiet woman no one had expected. For the first time, the visiting snipers realized that this wasn't a joke. Alyssa Cole wasn't just cleaning rifles. She was about to attempt a shot that could defy everything they thought they knew, and they would be witnesses to a moment that none of them would ever forget. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly, heat rising in shimmering waves above the sand, making distant steel targets appear warped and unreachable. The visiting snipers still muttered among themselves, some shaking their heads in disbelief at Alyssa Cole's quiet preparation for the 3,970-meter shot. Even Hunter Briggs, whose curiosity had grown into fascination, remained close, his eyes fixed on her every movement. But the story of Alyssa's skill was not new to everyone. A junior soldier leaning against a nearby barricade had whispered to another, "Did you know she wasn't always an armorer? She was part of a special long-range marksmanship program, classified, top of her class. Then she disappeared." The words barely reached Hunter, but enough to make him pause. He watched Alyssa from the corner of his eye as she adjusted the bipod, lining up the rifle with almost supernatural precision. There was a calm authority in the way she worked. This was no casual shot. Every move was deliberate, every calculation considered. Yet the snipers surrounding her treated it like a joke, laughing nervously at the absurdity of the challenge. They didn't realize that their mockery only made her focus sharper, her resolve stronger. Alyssa set the rifle down for a moment and scanned the horizon, squinting at the heat-shimmered target. Her past was a hidden strength, a foundation of knowledge forged in secrecy. She had spent years in extreme conditions, training for missions that demanded impossible precision. Her eyes, steady and calculating, revealed nothing of what she had endured, only the poise and confidence that came from mastery. Hunter finally broke the silence. "All right, tell me, why the secrecy? Why hide your talent?" His voice was quiet, respectful, not meant to pry, but Alyssa didn't answer immediately. She only adjusted the scope again, checking wind speed and direction, factoring in every detail. Finally, she spoke, her voice measured and calm. "I walked away because I didn't need approval. I didn't need accolades. The moment you chase recognition, you lose the clarity that makes you effective." The junior soldiers around them exchanged glances, whispering to each other. They had no idea that Alyssa's calm demeanor, the understated movements of her hands, and her precise calculations were the result of years in a highly secretive program designed to train the best long-range shooters in the world. Her achievements had never been publicized. Her records weren't posted on walls or announced at ceremonies. She had been a ghost in the system, present only where her skill was necessary, then gone. Hunter nodded slowly, understanding. He had been in situations where soldiers sought recognition over skill, where pride clouded judgment. Alyssa's quiet mastery made more sense now. She didn't need to prove herself. The skill was proof enough. And as he watched her prepare for the impossible shot, he realized that everyone who had doubted her was about to be forced to see that proof firsthand. Nearby, one of the visiting snipers whispered, "She's not just cleaning rifles. She knows exactly what she's doing. Look at her." The others leaned in, still skeptical, yet curiosity flickered in their eyes. The heat, the desert mirage, the extreme distance, it all seemed insurmountable. But Alyssa's composure made it appear routine, almost effortless. Hunter knew better. Effortless didn't come without years of preparation, training, and discipline. Alyssa set the scope, checking the minute adjustments needed for the bullet's path over nearly 4 kilometers. She calculated every variable in her mind: wind shifts, density, altitude, the subtle Coriolis effect across such a long distance. Each adjustment was a blend of science and intuition, honed through years of secret deployments and exercises that most would never hear about. Her hands moved confidently, placing her weapon in perfect alignment with the target. Hunter noticed her subtle nod, a quiet affirmation to herself. It was the same signal she had used in training exercises long ago, a confirmation that calculations were complete and the shot was ready. He realized that this wasn't bravado. This was instinct. Every movement was deliberate, every thought precise. Her hidden past was now visible in her actions. The quiet armorer was a master in her element. The group of visiting snipers now whispered nervously among themselves. They had started with jokes, teasing Alyssa for even entertaining the question of a 3,970-meter shot. But the longer they watched, the more evident it became. She had trained for this. They could see it in the way she handled the rifle, the adjustments she made, and the almost imperceptible tension in the bipod's stance. She was ready, and they were unprepared to witness her skill. Hunter stepped closer, his voice low and respectful. "How long have you been doing this?" Alyssa didn't answer immediately, her eyes scanning the horizon again. "Long enough to know the difference between an impossible shot and a carefully calculated one," she replied finally. Her voice was calm, measured, almost serene, but her words carried a weight that silenced everyone around her. The absurdity of the shot, the distance that seemed to defy physics, suddenly became a matter of calculation, not luck. A young sniper muttered under his breath, She's insane. No one should be able to do this." Hunter didn't correct him. Instead, he observed Alyssa with a mixture of awe and cautious excitement. She wasn't insane. She was focused. She was prepared. And she was about to challenge everything they thought was possible. Alyssa began final preparations. Every adjustment was meticulous. She checked the scope, re-zeroed minor calibrations, and accounted for every known factor that could influence the trajectory. Wind gusts, humidity, air density, and even minor mirages were all considered. Each calculation was executed with the precision of someone who had practiced these extremes repeatedly, unseen, unacknowledged. Hunter couldn't help but whisper to himself, "This is unreal." Alyssa's past, hidden and classified, had prepared her for this moment. Years of missions and exercises, countless impossible shots in training, had culminated in this single, critical moment. And now, standing in the Nevada desert, her skill was about to be tested, not in secrecy, not in the controlled confines of a program, but in front of soldiers who had underestimated her. The visiting snipers now watched in silence. The jokes and bravado had vanished. What they initially dismissed as impossible now seemed plausible. Alyssa's calm mastery, her precise preparation, and the quiet intensity in her eyes had shifted the entire dynamic. She was no longer just a background armorer. She was the center of attention, commanding respect without speaking loudly, without showing off. Hunter's heart raced as he realized the significance. The quiet woman who had gone unnoticed for so long had the skill, the knowledge, and the composure to attempt what most considered impossible. And the story of her hidden past, the classified marksmanship program, the secret missions, the years spent training in extreme conditions, suddenly gave context to every movement, every decision she had made in the armory and now on the range. Alyssa crouched behind her rifle, taking a slow, deliberate breath. The sun beat down, the desert wind shifted slightly, and the target glimmered at the edge of sight. Every whisper, every laugh from earlier in the day had vanished. The world had narrowed to the rifle, the target, and the calculations running silently in her mind. She was ready. Hunter glanced at the young soldiers, then back at her. "She's going to do it," he whispered. "Not maybe, not probably, she will do it." He had seen the preparation, the confidence, and the hidden mastery. The impossible question had evolved into a real challenge, and Alyssa Cole was poised to answer it. The desert held its breath. The snipers around her held theirs. And somewhere in that silence, history was about to be quietly rewritten by the woman no one had noticed, until now. The Nevada sun beat down relentlessly, painting the desert in shimmering heat waves that distorted the distant steel targets like a mirage. Alyssa Cole crouched behind her rifle, calm and composed, her gloved hands steady as she made final adjustments. Her mind was a quiet storm of calculations: ballistics, windage, temperature, spin drift, Coriolis effect, air density, and even the subtle optical illusions created by heat waves over the sand. Every factor mattered. One miscalculation could mean the difference between success and humiliation. The visiting snipers lingered, some still skeptical, some silently awed. The jokes and laughter from earlier had vanished. No one had expected the quiet armorer to approach the challenge with the poise and intensity of a master. Hunter Briggs stood beside her, leaning slightly forward, fascinated by the deliberate calm in her every movement. He had seen expert snipers in action, but nothing compared to the quiet authority she radiated. Alyssa set the rifle in place on the bipod and adjusted the scope with meticulous care. She measured angles, checked elevation, and recalibrated for the desert's heat shimmer, watching the horizon as though the wind itself would whisper secrets only she could understand. Every motion was deliberate, every calculation exact. This was not improvisation. This was mastery honed through years of secret, high-stakes training. The visiting snipers whispered nervously among themselves. She's actually serious," one muttered. Another squinted at the distant target, disbelief in his eyes. "No one should be able to do this. That's almost 4 kilometers away. That's insane." Yet Alyssa didn't flinch. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her entire world had narrowed to the rifle, the target, and the environmental factors she had spent hours calculating. Hunter noticed her subtle nod as she completed her preliminary calculations. It was almost imperceptible, but to him, it signaled readiness. She adjusted her gloves, checked the rifle's balance, and settled into her shooting stance with the ease of someone who had done this countless times before, though none of these men had ever witnessed it. Her calm, deliberate breathing betrayed no hint of nervousness. "Wind," she murmured softly, almost to herself. She had already measured, already accounted for fluctuations, but she double-checked. Every microsecond, every gust could affect the trajectory. The distant target shimmered under the afternoon sun, small and fragile, almost impossible to see. To most, it was beyond reach. To Alyssa, it was a problem waiting to be solved. Hunter leaned closer, quietly impressed. "This is insane," he whispered under his breath. "She actually knows what she's doing. She's calculating everything." The snipers nearby, previously dismissive, now watched in growing unease. The impossible shot was no longer a joke. Alyssa's meticulous preparation, calm demeanor, and measured confidence had transformed the challenge from absurdity into an inevitable demonstration of skill. Alyssa began her final adjustments. She checked the scope one last time, aligning the crosshairs with the distant steel plate. Every detail was accounted for: barrel harmonics, bullet velocity, environmental variables, and minor optical distortions caused by the desert heat. Her fingers traced the stock lightly, almost lovingly, ensuring that nothing was out of place. To the onlookers, her calmness was unnerving. They realized this was no ordinary shooter. This was someone who had spent years in extreme conditions, preparing for moments just like this. Minutes passed like hours. The visiting snipers whispered amongst themselves, some skeptical, some quietly hopeful that she would fail. They couldn't comprehend how someone they had ignored could even attempt such a feat. Hunter, however, had learned better. He had watched her move, observed her calculations, and felt the steady certainty in her voice. She wasn't taking a gamble. She was solving a problem. Alyssa adjusted the rifle's elevation again, factoring in Coriolis' effect for the near 4-kilometer distance. She recalculated windage, considering gusts that no ordinary shooter could have accounted for. Humidity, air density, temperature gradients, all variables that could ruin the shot were noted, accounted for, and compensated. She worked in silence, almost as if the desert itself had become her classroom and the distant steel target her final exam. Hunter couldn't take his eyes off her. The young snipers around him had gone quiet, their earlier arrogance replaced by a mixture of disbelief and awe, How is she even doing this? One whispered. That shot should be impossible, muttered another. Hunter shook his head slowly. No, he said under his breath. It's not impossible, she's just beyond what we understand. Alyssa's breathing remained steady. She adjusted the scope one last time, aligning the reticle with the shimmering target. Her gloved finger hovered over the trigger, poised like a pianist ready to strike the final note of a complex symphony. The desert wind shifted slightly, rippling over the sand, but she didn't flinch. Every variable had already been accounted for. She was ready. Hunter glanced at the young soldiers again, some wide-eyed, some holding their breath, all of them realizing they were about to witness something extraordinary. The tension in the air was palpable. Even the desert seemed to hold its breath with her. Time slowed, each second stretching into an eternity as she prepared for the shot that no one thought could be made. Finally, Alyssa whispered to herself, almost inaudibly, "Steady, steady." Her voice was calm, precise, unshakable. She exhaled slowly, settling into the position she had practiced countless times in the shadowed corners of classified ranges, in deserts, mountains, and high-altitude terrains. Her hands gripped the rifle, her eye focused on the crosshairs, and the world beyond that scope melted away. Hunter leaned closer, almost afraid to breathe. "This is it," he murmured. "The impossible shot." The snipers around him were silent now, each man unable to tear his eyes away. What had started as a joke, a challenge, a moment of curiosity, had transformed into something almost mythical. Alyssa was not just a shooter. She was an embodiment of skill, discipline, and quiet mastery. A final glance at the distant target, a subtle nod to herself, and Alyssa settled completely. The rifle rested perfectly on the bipod, her gloved hand steady. She was ready to fire a shot that would challenge every assumption, defy expectations, and forever alter the perception of what was possible. The impossible was within reach. And as the desert wind whispered across the range, carrying the echoes of past challenges and victories hidden from the world, Alyssa Cole prepared to make history. The target at 3,970 meters waited silently, a distant speck shimmering under the Nevada sun, unaware that it was about to be struck with precision that defied reason, by a woman the world had overlooked for far too long. The quiet armorer had become the center of attention, her presence commanding respect without a word, her preparation speaking louder than any boast or joke. The impossible shot, calculated down to the last variable, was moments away from becoming reality, and the men watching knew in the depths of their bones that history was about to witness something extraordinary. The Nevada desert seemed to hold its breath. Every whisper of wind, every shimmer of heat above the sand became a backdrop to a moment that was about to redefine possibility. Alyssa Cole crouched behind her rifle, calm, precise, her gloved hands steady as she made the final minor adjustments. The crosshairs were aligned with the distant steel target, glimmering faintly at 3,970 meters, a distance most snipers would never attempt in their lifetimes. Hunter Briggs stood just behind her, holding his breath. He had observed countless marksmen in action, yet nothing had ever prepared him for this level of mastery. The visiting snipers had gone silent. Their arrogance had vanished into disbelief, replaced by awe and anxiety. They whispered among themselves, but none dared break the tension with movement or sound. The impossible challenge had become real. Alyssa exhaled slowly, a controlled rhythm she had perfected over years of secret training, calculating every variable with almost surgical precision. Wind speed, mirage distortion, temperature gradients, bullet velocity, barrel harmonics, and even the subtle Coriolis effect caused by Earth's rotation. Every number, every fraction, every tiny calculation mattered. She murmured softly under her breath, "Steady, steady, steady." Her words were not heard by anyone but herself, a mantra to keep focus razor-sharp. Hunter could only watch, mesmerized by the calm in her eyes. To the untrained observer, her actions seemed routine, almost serene. But the truth was that every millisecond of concentration mattered. A single miscalculation would ruin the shot entirely. Alyssa's finger hovered over the trigger, poised to press. The steel target, distant and shimmering, seemed impossibly small, yet her mind had already accounted for the trajectory, the wind, the weight of the bullet, and the subtle vibrations of the rifle. This was no gamble. This was the culmination of years of precision training, secrecy, and experience, hidden from the world until this very moment. Hunter whispered to himself, almost afraid to speak aloud, she's going to do it. The young snipers around him had gone completely silent. Every doubt, every mocking thought they had carried before had evaporated. The impossible challenge now had a human face, calm, determined, and unyielding. Alyssa Cole. She exhaled one final time, aligning the reticle perfectly with the target, and squeezed the trigger with smooth, deliberate pressure. The rifle recoiled slightly, a sharp yet controlled kick, and the bullet launched into the air, disappearing into the shimmering desert horizon. Time seemed to stretch. The bullet traveled nearly 4 kilometers, and for the observers the desert seemed to hold its breath. There was no sound to mark its path, only the tense anticipation of what was about to unfold. The visiting snipers' jaws dropped, their eyes following the invisible trajectory of the projectile with disbelief. Even Hunter could hardly comprehend the distance, the precision, and the mastery that had just been unleashed. The distant steel target trembled as the bullet approached, every inch of its flight an extraordinary testament to skill, knowledge, and composure. Alyssa remained completely still, watching through her scope, tracking the shot with unwavering focus. There was no hint of doubt, no hesitation. This was the result of countless hours spent in training, unseen and unrecognized, preparing for moments exactly like this. Then with a resonant clang, the bullet struck the target dead center. The sound echoed faintly across the desert, small yet monumental. Gasps erupted among the visiting snipers. Some staggered back, unsure if they had just witnessed reality. Others fell silent, staring at the distant steel target with wide eyes, speechless. Hunter exhaled slowly, a mixture of relief, awe, and profound admiration washing over him. The impossible had just been achieved. Alyssa lowered the rifle slowly, her movements as controlled and deliberate as they had been throughout the entire process. She didn't smile, didn't boast. The calm authority in her eyes conveyed something far more powerful, certainty. She had solved a problem that everyone else had dismissed as absurd, transforming the impossible into fact. Hunter stepped forward, his voice barely above a whisper, filled with awe. You did it. That's unbelievable." Alyssa gave him a faint nod, acknowledging his words without a hint of pride. The quiet armorer had become a legend in a single moment, her skill undeniable. The visiting snipers, previously filled with laughter and arrogance, now regarded her with a mixture of awe and disbelief. I don't believe it," one muttered. That's 4 kilometers. No one should be able to do that." Another simply shook his head, silent, processing what had just occurred. Alyssa's calm mastery had shattered their assumptions, rewritten the limits of possibility, and done so without fanfare or self-promotion. Hunter watched her, his mind racing. He had suspected she was extraordinary, but the demonstration exceeded even his expectations. The quiet woman who had been overlooked, dismissed, and ignored had executed a shot that would go down in history, at least among those who witnessed it. And in that moment he understood something profound. True mastery didn't require recognition. It didn't need applause. It existed in the discipline, focus, and preparation that Alyssa had carried silently all these years. Alyssa lowered her scope and wiped a faint sheen of sweat from her brow. The sun reflected off her gloves, the rifle, and the distant steel target, yet her calmness remained unshaken. She had completed the impossible, and though the surrounding soldiers were still struggling to comprehend what they had seen, she already moved on, quietly preparing to check her calculations, to ensure her shot had achieved exactly what she intended. One of the visiting snipers finally spoke aloud, his voice shaking. She just did what we thought was impossible." The room was silent for a moment. The wind rustled across the desert, carrying the faint echo of the bullet striking the target, It was as if the desert itself had witnessed the feat and acknowledged it. Hunter stepped closer to Alyssa, his voice filled with genuine respect. "I don't know anyone who could have done that. Not here, not anywhere. That was perfect." Alyssa nodded once, her expression calm, her eyes betraying nothing but quiet confidence. She didn't need accolades. The achievement spoke for itself. The visiting snipers began murmuring to each other, still processing the magnitude of what they had seen. Their arrogance had been humbled, their assumptions challenged. They realized that the quiet armorer, the woman who had blended into the background for so long, possessed skill, precision, and focus that far surpassed their expectations. Hunter finally allowed himself a smile, watching her prepare to return the rifle to its case. The impossible shot had been made. A legend had been born in that desert, in a quiet demonstration of precision, calculation, and mastery. And Alyssa Cole, the woman who had been overlooked for so long, had shown the world, at least the small group of witnesses, that impossible was merely a problem waiting to be solved. For the first time that day, Alyssa allowed herself a faint smile. Not for recognition, not for applause, but for the quiet satisfaction of having achieved what so many thought could never be done. The target stood tall, a testament to skill, patience, and relentless preparation. And somewhere in the desert air, in that fleeting moment of triumph, Alyssa Cole had transformed from the quiet armorer into a markswoman legend, invisible no longer. The echo of the bullet's impact still lingered faintly in the desert air, a resonance of skill that seemed almost impossible to comprehend. The distant steel target, once a shimmering speck on the horizon, now stood as undeniable proof. Alyssa Cole had executed a shot no one in that desert, perhaps no one in the world, had attempted before. The silence that followed was deafening. The visiting snipers could barely process what they had witnessed. Mouths hung open, eyes wide, and even the most arrogant among them found themselves humbled. What had begun as a casual, mocking challenge had transformed into a live demonstration of skill that defied expectation. Whispers spread across the range like wildfire. "Did you see that? She actually did it. Impossible." Hunter Briggs exhaled slowly, a mixture of awe and disbelief coursing through him. He had seen experts in their prime, top marksmen and elite shooters, but nothing had prepared him for this level of mastery. Alyssa had made the impossible shot appear almost routine, a quiet testament to her years of preparation, secret training, and absolute focus. He understood now why she had remained hidden for so long. Recognition, accolades, and attention were unnecessary. Her skill spoke louder than any words. Alyssa herself remained calm, composed as always. She carefully lowered her rifle, wiped her gloves, and began methodically checking her calculations. To the onlookers, it seemed almost ceremonial, her meticulous approach reinforcing the fact that this was no luck. Every move had been deliberate, every factor accounted for. She had solved a problem, not sought applause. One of the visiting snipers, finally finding his voice, whispered, I can't believe it. That shot, it was 4 kilometers. His companion nodded, still pale. That's record-breaking. That's insane. She's a legend already. Murmurs spread further down the line, reverberating across the desert, leaving no doubt that Alyssa's quiet mastery had left a lasting impression. Hunter approached her, voice low but filled with admiration. "You've changed everything. Nobody here is going to forget that shot. Not today, not ever." Alyssa offered a faint nod, her eyes reflecting the subtle satisfaction of a mission accomplished, yet revealing nothing else. She had no need for applause, the achievement was its own reward. The visiting snipers, who had come with confidence and bravado, now studied her in silence. They had been certain that she was merely an armorer, a support figure in the background, nothing more. That assumption had been shattered within moments, replaced by respect, and a hint of awe. The quiet woman who had blended into the shadows had just rewritten the limits of what they believed possible. Hunter's mind raced as he processed the implications. Alyssa's skill was not only remarkable, it was transformative. She had demonstrated precision, patience, and mastery at a level few could ever imagine. And while her presence had been understated, the performance had spoken volumes. The impossible shot was no longer a theoretical concept. It had been executed flawlessly before their very eyes. Alyssa carefully packed her rifle back into its case, movements deliberate and precise. She glanced at Hunter, then at the other soldiers around her, offering a subtle, quiet acknowledgement of what had just occurred. There was no need for fanfare. Her presence and skill had already made the statement. And yet, those who had witnessed it would not soon forget. The legend of Alyssa Cole had begun in that moment, spreading silently among the ranks of those who had underestimated her. The visiting snipers began to murmur among themselves, their earlier bravado replaced by curiosity and respect. "She didn't just make the shot, she calculated it perfectly," one said. Another nodded, still in disbelief. "I've never seen anyone handle a rifle like that, not even the best of us." A quiet reverence settled over the group, the impossible achievement now reshaping their understanding of what skill truly meant. Hunter watched Alyssa as she stood, gloved hands resting lightly on her rifle case. Her calm, composed demeanor contrasted sharply with the excitement and awe around her. The world had just witnessed a demonstration of mastery, yet she carried herself as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. And that, perhaps, was the most extraordinary part of all. Alyssa glanced across the desert, the steel target gleaming faintly in the late afternoon sun. The shot had been perfect, every variable accounted for, every calculation flawless. The result was undeniable, yet she didn't linger in triumph. For her, this was merely the natural conclusion of preparation, focus, and experience. The achievement belonged to the skill, not to her ego. The young soldiers who had watched in awe began to approach cautiously, hesitant to break the spell but eager to understand what they had just witnessed. One finally asked, voice trembling, How did you do it? It's insane." Alyssa looked at him briefly, expression calm. "It's not luck," she said simply. "It's preparation, patience, and understanding the rules of physics. Everything else is secondary." Hunter stepped forward, a proud smile forming on his face. "You've set a new standard today. People are going to talk about this for years. That shot, that's history." Alyssa merely nodded, acknowledging the statement without a word. Recognition had never been her goal. The quiet satisfaction of executing a flawless, seemingly impossible shot was reward enough. The visiting snipers, previously brash and overconfident, began to analyze the event in hushed tones. "She accounted for wind, mirage, temperature, and probably the Coriolis effect," one whispered. Another shook his head. "Nobody even teaches that level of precision outside classified programs. She must have trained for years in secret." Slowly, respect and admiration replaced disbelief. The quiet armorer had become a figure of legend before their very eyes. Hunter observed the scene, his mind racing with implications. Alyssa's performance had not only demonstrated extraordinary skill, but had also changed how everyone would perceive long-range marksmanship. She had proven that preparation, mastery, and calm focus could defy expectations, rewrite limits, and leave a lasting impression. The legend had begun, not with fanfare but quietly, in the desert sun. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the desert, Alyssa collected her gear, her movements deliberate, unhurried, and precise. Hunter followed, walking beside her. "You've just changed the standard for everyone here," he said softly. Alyssa's response was a simple nod. The lesson was clear. True mastery required no announcement, no showmanship. It spoke for itself. The visiting snipers, now subdued and respectful, began leaving the range in small groups, still whispering about what they had witnessed. Some were shaking their heads in disbelief. Some were silent, lost in thought. Every one of them carried with them the memory of a shot that seemed impossible, executed flawlessly by the quiet armorer no one had seen coming. Hunter paused, watching Alyssa one last time as she adjusted the straps on her rifle case. He knew that her skill would not go unnoticed forever. The story of the 3,970-meter shot would ripple outward, whispered among soldiers, instructors, and eventually the wider world. Yet Alyssa didn't seek recognition. She had achieved her goals silently, flawlessly, and with the quiet authority that had defined her entire life. And in that moment, as the desert shadows lengthened, Hunter realized something profound. Alyssa Cole was more than a shooter. She was a master, a legend, and a reminder that the greatest achievements often go unnoticed until the right moment, and that when that moment arrived, it could leave the world breathless. The Nevada desert began to cool as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the sand. The once blazing heat softened into a golden glow, reflecting off the distant steel target where Alyssa Cole's bullet had struck almost 4 kilometers away. The range was quiet now, the earlier chaos and murmurs replaced by a reverent stillness. The impossible shot had been made. History had been silently rewritten. Alyssa packed her rifle carefully, each movement precise and deliberate. There was no rush, no need for ceremony. The quiet satisfaction of a challenge met and conquered sufficed. Her gloved hands moved over the case with the same care and focus she had exhibited throughout the day. Hunter Briggs, standing nearby, watched her with profound respect. He had witnessed many skilled soldiers, but never someone who had combined calm, precision, and mastery like Alyssa. The visiting snipers were scattered across the range, still murmuring among themselves. Many were replaying the shot in their minds, analyzing what they had seen and realizing that they had underestimated someone they had dismissed as merely an armorer. "She didn't just hit it," one whispered. "She accounted for everything, every variable. That's not luck." Another nodded, eyes wide. "Years of training, experience hidden from us. She's incredible." Hunter stepped closer to Alyssa, voice low but full of admiration. "You've done something remarkable. Not just the shot, but how you carried it, calm, calculated, flawless." Alyssa nodded, accepting the words without pride. For her, mastery was its own reward. Recognition was irrelevant. The achievement existed in the execution, in the moment when preparation and skill converged perfectly. As the sun continued its descent, painting the desert in hues of orange and purple, Alyssa allowed herself a moment of reflection. The shot, impossible to many, had been another step in a life defined by preparation, discipline, and quiet mastery. Her past, years in classified programs, missions in extreme conditions, training in isolation, had all led to this point. And now the world, or at least the small group of witnesses, had finally glimpsed the depth of her skill. Hunter glanced around at the visiting snipers. They were subdued, humbled, and in awe. Their earlier laughter, arrogance, and disbelief had been replaced by quiet reverence. Alyssa had taught them a lesson that no amount of boasting or experience could replace. Mastery is earned through discipline, patience, and focus, not by seeking recognition or admiration. "Do you ever regret hiding all that skill?" Hunter asked quietly, almost hesitantly. Alyssa looked at him, eyes calm and unwavering. "Regret," she said softly. "Number recognition can be fleeting, skill, mastery that lasts." Her words carried a quiet power, resonating more deeply than any applause ever could. The shot was not a spectacle, it was a demonstration of principle. The young soldiers approached, still hesitant but eager to understand what they had witnessed. How did you do that?" one asked, voice trembling. Alyssa offered a faint smile. "Calculation, patience, and understanding your environment. The impossible is rarely impossible. It's just a problem waiting to be solved." Her answer was simple, yet it encapsulated the philosophy that had guided her life and defined her legendary shot. Hunter watched as the soldiers nodded, absorbing the lesson in silence. Alyssa had shown them that mastery was not about ego, accolades, or recognition. It was about preparation, skill, and focus. She had demonstrated that impossible feats were achievable when approached with discipline and expertise. And in that quiet, understated way, she had become an example for everyone present, inspiring awe without boasting or fanfare. The desert air was cooling now, carrying the faint sound of wind across the sand. Alyssa secured her rifle, adjusting the straps on the case. Every motion was deliberate, precise, yet effortless. Hunter realized that this calm efficiency was part of what made her extraordinary. She didn't need the spotlight. She let her actions speak for themselves. and in doing so, she had already written her legacy. The visiting snipers began to leave the range, their heads lowered in respect. The day had begun with jokes, challenges, and disbelief, but it ended in recognition of a skill that none of them had expected. Alyssa had transformed from an overlooked armorer into a figure of legend in mere hours. Her calm mastery, the impossible shot, and the quiet authority she exuded had left an indelible mark on everyone who had witnessed it. Hunter fell in step beside her as they walked toward the base, the desert stretching endlessly around them. "You've set a standard today," he said softly. "No one here will ever forget it." Alyssa's gaze remained steady, her voice calm. "It's not about the standard," she replied. "It's about understanding what's possible when you prepare, focus, and stay disciplined. The shot, it was just a demonstration of that principle." As they approached the armory, Alyssa reflected on the day. She had achieved what many thought impossible, yet she felt no triumph, no need for applause. The lesson was clear, both to her and to those who had watched. True mastery does not require validation. It exists in the skill itself, in the preparation, and in the execution. And in this moment, she had shown that mastery could redefine what others believed was possible. Hunter glanced at her, admiration and awe clear in his eyes. "Do you ever get tired of being underestimated?" he asked quietly. Alyssa smiled faintly. "Underestimation is part of the advantage," she replied. "It gives you space to work without distraction. The element of surprise, it's powerful." Her calm confidence was almost palpable, yet it never veered into arrogance. She had learned to let skill speak louder than words. The story of the 3,970-meter shot would ripple quietly among those who had witnessed it, whispered in barracks, retold in hushed tones, and gradually spread beyond the base. It was a legend born not from recognition, but from execution. Alyssa Cole had demonstrated what few could imagine, and in doing so, she had inspired respect, awe, and a subtle shift in perception about what was possible. As the last rays of the sun disappeared behind the desert horizon, Alyssa placed her rifle case down carefully, taking a moment to observe the empty range. The target in the distance stood as silent proof of what had been achieved. She had faced the impossible, calculated every factor, and executed the shot flawlessly. And in that quiet, almost invisible victory, she had left a mark that would linger far longer than anyone's fleeting praise. Hunter stood beside her, both silent, both aware of the magnitude of the moment. The impossible had been accomplished. The legend had been born. And Alyssa Cole, the woman who had quietly mastered her craft and waited for the right moment, had proven that true skill, calculated, precise, and disciplined, could defy expectations, rewrite limits, and command respect without ever seeking it. The desert held its breath one final time, a silent witness to the mastery, the discipline, and the quiet authority of a woman who had transformed the impossible into reality. Alyssa Cole turned, her gaze steady, and walked back toward the base, leaving behind not just a target but a legacy, a legend forged in silence, precision, and undeniable skill.